frustrates me about this bill is it was Katie Stewart's bill, right? Across the river in Illinois. She's in District 112. She used to be my state representative, and for some reason they drew a line around my house, and I'm not in her district anymore. But the 112th district is represented by Katie Stewart. She started this bill, but it was a pharmaceutical bill. It was something that had nothing to do with the Safety Act. The Democrats said, yeah, we're going to take that bill, and overnight they turned it into this monstrosity. I mean, you touched on it a little bit here about how they didn't even have time to talk to states' attorneys about it. React to the process by which this bill actually became a law, and J.B. Pritzker was drooling over the opportunity to sign it. What was the priority? Get down to the brass tacks. What was the Democrats' priority? To do this in the middle of the night, to hand it over to J.B. Pritzker so he could get his grubby fingers on it and sign it into law? What did they get out of it?
Well, what they got is they pushed a bill through that had no other way of passing the General Assembly except for in the wee hours of the night. They did this 3 days before the new General Assembly in 2021 was set to take over.
So the bottom of the ninth.
So it was the bottom of the ninth in a lame duck session. They did what's called in Illinois, it's called a gut and replace, where they took an otherwise innocuous bill that had been through the House of Representatives, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, they gutted it, replaced it with the Safety Act, and with a matter of hours had passed it and eventually turned it into law. That is how Illinois governs when they're trying to pass a law that's very confrontational, very sensitive. They look for a political weakness in the system, and they'll push it through at a moment's notice without giving anybody the chance to react. That's how they pass this.
You said gut and replace is what that's called. They gut and replace Katie Stewart's bill to make this happen. Katie Stewart, a Democrat, voted against it. She won't come on the show and tell us why it was not good enough for her vote. Why is that?
Well, it wasn't good enough for her vote because she knew how bad it was, right? And keeping in mind, here's what happened. They got the 60 votes in the House of Representatives that they needed. They didn't get more. They've got, 73 or 74 House members from Democrats? They got 60. And they had to browbeat the 60th one to get them to vote with 30 minutes left.
Not a single Republican.
Not a single Republican.
They didn't even have to read it. They couldn't even read it.
But what they were fighting about, the Democrats were fighting amongst themselves that day of who they were going to let out and not have to vote in favor of it to get the 60 that they needed, right? So Katie was lucky that there was someone less vulnerable than her in the pecking order that they were able to get them to vote without making it to Katie. Katie was protected at least from having to vote. But trust me, if they needed her vote,
she'd have given it. She does what she's told.
They would have got it.
By the Democratic Party, not
Correct.
by the people.
So it wasn't her standing up for her people, the 112th. That was her skating by the skin of her teeth, not having to vote for something because somebody else was made to be the patsy.
She should have been the loudest Democrat against it because they did it to her bill.
Man, Tom, I really appreciate hearing the detail because there's only so much you can consume in, the 30-second ads and the mailers and things where you have to get a point across. And just hearing you talk about the specifics, especially of the Safety Act, it's very, very interesting. I live in Illinois, too. And one of those things that I've always come across, crime isn't a new problem in Illinois. We tend to, though, at least for me, I'm being selfish here, in the suburbs, we think about that as a city problem a little bit more. And so people talk about Chicago crime and we just shake our heads. We go, gosh, they need to figure that out in Chicago. What I'm concerned about in the suburbs is that coming to my town now.
It's coming.
With the Safety Act, it seems like they're opening the doors to so much of this. What can a good attorney general of Illinois do to not only draw that line around the suburbs for people like me, I don't feel safe again, but also reverse that trend? Because what we're seeing in Illinois and Chicago is something that's decades long. It's just growing, and this would just further that. How can you reverse that trend?
Well, let me make sure. I'm not interested, with all due respect, of drawing a line around the suburbs because that's not fair to the people in the city.
Right.
This issue, and I'm glad we're having this conversation because this issue that's going on and started within our cities, it's a statewide problem. And for those of us, I live in a rural community. You live in the suburbs. It's our problem, too, and we need to take it serious. So to the extent that this horrific law has created a conversation outside the city is a good thing because they need our help, right? One of the things we can specifically do is to repeal the Safety Act, repeal it legislatively or have it invalidated through the court of law. Kwame Raoul has already said that he's going to defend this law. He has to defend it because his top financial contributors have told him to do it. If I'm the Attorney General, I will join the now 58 or 60 states' attorneys in Illinois out of the 102 that have sued the governor and the Attorney General. The Attorney General has been sued by 60 states' attorneys. Think about that. I'd be ashamed of myself. but he's yet going to fight and defend the governor because of political survival. We can get rid of this thing. And there's pieces of that law that are worth discussion, but the inequity where Annie started this off, here's the thing. They think that if we create this law, we're going to have poor people that otherwise couldn't get out of jail are now going to not be in jail solely because of money. That's a talking point that this law does not even address. Because if a judge is inclined to set a bail at an amount that you can't get out, under this law, the judge can just detain you without offering you any bail. So how does that help any alleged inequity, okay? And that's why I've always laughed about it. You're going, it's inequitable because the judge sets a bail and you can't afford the bail. Yeah, I'm like, okay, so now the judge can just hold you without giving you bail. Do you think he's just going to let you walk free because of this new law? No, he's just going to detain you and hold you until your trial, which has constitutional problems that I've talked about. It's not for today. But the alleged inequities that they're talking about, this law doesn't even address. And that's why I go back to where I started. This was a very poor attempt to try to satisfy the guilt of these politicians who are decades have avoided and been unsuccessful in trying to address the issues within our city that has plagued their city, these communities forever with the crime. It's, again, lack of economic opportunity. And, so for you being in the suburbs, I'm kind of glad you're talking about it right now, because maybe with folks such as yourself and others in the suburbs, we'll finally get our politicians to address these issues.
Yeah.
Tom DeVore in studio with us right now. He's running for Attorney General in the state of Illinois as the Republican candidate. And we're watching the polls that come in. Ryan talks about polls every day in Wiggins America. We are seeing shift after shift after shift of solid Dem to leans Dem to maybe toss-up. Some toss-ups that are leaning Republican right now. Illinois has a really, really insulated wall around a potential red wave. But there is a shelf where that red wave could come in. I know that you'll be real with me, Tom DeVore. I know you won't blow smoke.
Nope.
What are you expecting, or what are your honest hopes for what happens next Tuesday in Illinois?
At a minimum, next Tuesday, the people of Illinois are going to show this nation that we're not as blue as they try to pretend we are. That's going to be an absolute certainty. The last 2.5, 3 years, Governor Pritzker has ruled over the people of this state like a tyrant. And that has changed a lot of minds in this state to become convinced that those progressive Democrat, not blue dog Democrats like I grew up with, those were real people. These progressive Democrat ideologues are destroying freedom and liberty. And when they started harming the children of the suburbs, the soccer moms that we're now hearing about on national TV, they're all of a sudden switching from Democrat to Republican, they hurt their kids. They took their kids' high school educations and college educations and destroyed them. The emotional harm that's been done to these children is going to last a generation. The loss of learning is going to last a generation. And these moms will not forget that. And that is not going to go well for J.B. Pritzker, Kwame Raoul, and the rest of these Democrats in the General Assembly that sat idly by for 2.5 years and watched their children suffer. It's not going to go well for them. So at a minimum, we're going to turn this state into a purple state, in my opinion. I'm
looking forward to it. And I know that there are so many people who have stepped into the political fray for this campaign cycle. Have you ever run for anything before?
I was on the county board 2 years ago, or 10 years ago for 2 years. But I'm glad you brought that up, because I spent most of the last 3 years fighting for people and small businesses and families. But one of the things I was also doing is encouraging everyday people to get involved in office. Because there's one thing I know for sure. The political class, Democrat and Republican, is what's destroyed this state. Not just the Democrats. The political elite in the Republican Party are just as culpable as the Democrats. And the only one that can push back on them are good, honest, hardworking, everyday people that step up to do the right thing and just not trying to be career politicians.
I've been watching Illinois politics for some time now, and I've said this before, and I will say it until I'm blue in the face. But the idea that we're told what kind of Republican can win in the state of Illinois, they're not winning. There aren't any. We've been told that this is what you have to do to get elected as a Republican in the state of Illinois and in Cook County and in Chicago, but they don't win. Why not lose with some dignity and integrity?
Well, you talked about the the lady, the Democrat, this bill over in the Collinsville, Madison County area, they told my friend Jen Korte that she was not the right kind of Republican. And she showed them wrong. And she is the right kind of Republican because she's stepping up to fight for families and just do the right thing. And she's not going to pander to, these ideologues in the Republican Party who say you need to be the right kind. Because do you think they believe I'm the right kind? They don't. And have they ever won an election? No, they can't win elections because they have no core values that they're trying to stand up for. And so I'm not here to beat on the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, but they've not been successful in Illinois. And it's people like Jen and me and a lot of others that have stepped up this election cycle that just said, we're just here to help people. We're not here to be politicians. I think that's going to make a big difference this year.
How much do you think also that what we're doing right now here in 2022, I mean, is it make or break in 2022? If we don't do it now, it doesn't happen? Or do you think the momentum extends past next Tuesday?
The momentum has to go past next Tuesday. Even if we win, the momentum has to continue. My friend Jason Plummer, who's a senator in our part of the world, told me one time when him and I were talking, he's an intelligent man. He said, if the people of our state wake up and they never go back to sleep, that's the establishment politicians on both parties. That's their worst nightmare. Because the people will take back over and they'll solve these problems. So even if we're not as completely successful as we want to be, they can't give up because that's what people like J.B. Pritzker want. That's what tyrants want. They want people to give up and to just look up to him on his throne to solve the world's problems and solve the state's problems. That's the worst kind of government we can have. We have to have a government where the problems are solved by people and not by wannabe tyrants.
Well, Tom DeVore, online at tomdevore.com. Please check out his candidacy. Your last plea, what can people do other than obviously go vote for you and for the Republican ticket in Illinois and in Missouri, of course? Anything else you can ask of them week out?
They need to overperform is what we need to do. It's very important. When they always talk about in our state, and again, in Missouri it's different, but it's still the same, is that the only reason that the Democrats are continuing to be so successful in Illinois, there's a lot of reasons. One of them is the Republicans are disheartened and they don't participate. If we have high turnout this election cycle, I'm talking 60, 70, 75% of the Republicans, we're going to win all of these races.
Yeah.
We will win them all because the Democrats are not going to overcome. The governor of Illinois, he talks about abortion not because it's a hot topic in Illinois right now. Abortion rights are well protected in Illinois, regardless of your opinion on it. Mm-hmm. He talks about it because he's trying to get the Democrats off the couch to go vote because they're not enamored with what he's been doing either. If the Republicans turn out, everybody that they know votes, will win every one of these elections.
Well, you heard it here on the Annie Frey Show. We are less than a week out, 6 days from Election Day in Illinois. You can go vote right now. Take people with you. Don't kidnap them. Although after the first day, you can do that and not have to be detained, which I don't recommend at all. No kidnapping, people. Kidnapping and crime is bad. And we stand by that on the Annie Frey Show. Tom DeVore, thank you for being in studio with us.
Thank you.
Folks that are listening right now, if you're in your car and you're at lunch, make sure you download that Odyssey app, AUDACY. And if you didn't hear the whole conversation with Tom DeVore, rewind to the beginning of the show because he's been here since noon, and we are grateful for it. Let's take a quick break. Wiggins